So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar about opportunities in the UK offshore wind industry. Could I now ask Juan, Virgilio and Marianne to put their cameras on and introduce today's session? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, Marianne, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning.
Quite important for us. Thank you to all the attendants for being today with us. Thank you to the embassy for trusting again in AE to develop this kind of workshops. You know that we are in a very demanding and challenging period here in Spain. Thank you also to all the speakers, our UK colleagues, and from the different platforms and associations, and also from the wind sector that are going to give you some insights about the situation in the UK market today that could be useful for our companies. We are now feeling in Spain a very demanding, challenging, and exciting moment with a huge interest in offshore wind. You know, we are dealing with some of the most important steps in the process, like the maritime spatial planning. It's a bit tricky and perhaps something like a tough issue for us because it's quite important to do it well in order to get the right ordering and spatial planning for the future. We are also dealing with the national strategy for offshore wind and marine energies, where the government is going to launch it along this year. We are also under some updating process of the regulation that are more than 10 years old, and that should be updated to adapt it to the new reality of the technology. So more and more initiatives that we are dealing with this year, and we hope that along this year would be solved. We have also some opportunities that we could take advantage here in Spain, like the opportunities coming from the European funds, the recovery funds. And inside this kind of funds, offshore wind could play a very important role. Most important about the R&D point of view, the increment of the updating process of the regulatory issues, but also the increment of the capabilities of the different platforms we have in Spain for R&D and testing. So quite important for us, a very demanding period, and we think we are at the right sector, in the right sector at the right moment. We have some constraints in Spain, you know, and we have to push for floating offshore wind due to our very deep waters around the peninsula and the Canary Islands. We have some experience in the past with more than 9 gigawatts that were under permitting more than 2 years ago. None of them were finally installed, but we are again under the same situation. We have to deal with the social acceptance, we have to deal with the environmental debate, and we have to be able to kick this process off again because we have the technology, we have the know-how, and we have some very important partners that our colleagues from UK that could help us in this challenge. So we are UK is ahead of us in the promotion of this kind of technology. Spain history about offshore wind is mainly focused on industry and R&D, where we have a very important role both in industry manufacturing components from the wind farms that have been installed in many parts of Europe, and in R&D playing a leadership in terms of development of floating offshore wind prototypes. But in the area of the commercial wind farms, we are a bit rookies. So we know that we can get many lessons learned, we can many insights and many know-how from our colleagues, our partners that are coming from other countries, other markets, that they have plenty of experience in this area. So I would like not to take more minutes of your time. I would like to thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you to the embassy. Thank you to all of you. I would like to give the floor to Marianne to do the welcome words. Thank you and good morning, Marianne.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Juan Virgilio. Yes, looking forward to working with you again in the Spanish market, looking at opportunities just mentioned here. But as you all know, we're going to be focusing on the UK today. And it's a real pleasure working with the Asociación Eólica once again. We've worked with you several times in the past to present the UK offshore wind sector, market, and also to help identify business opportunities in the UK for your members. Also welcome some others who have joined from other parts of Europe as well. So that's really good that we've got a big audience today. So I'm Marianne Carlin, responsible for the energy sector in the Department for International Trade at the British Embassy Madrid. What we do is we support Spanish companies to enter the UK market and develop their business there. So as you can imagine, offshore wind is one of the areas we're working very closely with Spanish and other European companies, encouraging them and you to bring your engineering, manufacturing skills to the UK to help us develop the sector and meet our ambitious net zero targets by 2050. And recently the government's announced 78% reductions in emissions by 2035. So, well, as you know, the UK is world leader in offshore wind with 10.5 gigawatts already installed and operational, and with a target of 40 gigawatts by 2030, including 1 gigawatt of floating offshore wind. So the investment opportunity is huge for developers, for OEMs and supply chain. And the UK government has unleashed the potential of this industry, which has seen the cost of offshore wind fall by 2/3 in the last 5 years. So we've got several sort of commitments from the UK government recently. One of the big ones is the Prime Minister's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, which was announced last November, and sets out the milestones to deliver the UK's offshore wind objectives. I'm sure we'll hear more about these in a minute from all our speakers, but mainly they include investment of £160 million into ports and manufacturing infrastructure, stricter supply chain requirements, and a lot of companies in Spain have asked me about the local content issues. So there's going to be stricter supply chain requirements in the contracts for difference auction, which will enable the delivery of 60% UK content in offshore wind projects and help attract inward investment from companies like yourselves. And that also includes building more efficient network using smart technologies to integrate offshore wind into the energy system. And also through our presidency of COP26, which will take place in Glasgow in November this year, the UK will urge ambitious actions from countries, from businesses, from cities and investors to drive progress towards our net zero targets and the global net zero targets. One of the key areas which will help us drive this progress is offshore wind, of course. So I hope the session today will make it clear that there is significant potential for you all and to think about expanding your business in the UK. So you'll hear more details about the UK plans in a moment from our expert panel of speakers. Apart from the projects in the UK in general, which my colleague Carl John will speak about in a moment, we'll be hearing from the Scottish Deep Wind Cluster about initiatives in Scotland, both in fixed and floating, including a ScotWind project. The Offshore Renewable Catapult will present their Centre of Excellence for floating wind and the specific areas of focus, which I hope will be of interest to many of you. I know we've had several questions about potential R&D, and you mentioned it earlier. And that's the Centre of Excellence is a perfect place to look at potential partnerships with both in the UK and in Spain, and also in third markets. Then Scottish Power will present their projects and their current and future supply chain needs as the sector develops and the number of wind farms increase through the future CFD auctions. And we'll finish with Juliet Uri from Uri Clark Solicitors, who we work very closely with at DIT. And we'll speak to you about immigration and movement of people in the UK post-Brexit, which I know is something that you definitely will be asking me about. And I'm sure Juliet will clarify many of your questions. So we'll have some time for questions at the end of this. So please write up in the question box as the speakers present, and then we'll have a 10-minute session at the end when we finish the presentation. So that's it from me. I'll pass over to Carl. Just a little bit about Carl. He's a specialist in renewable energy for the Department of International Trade. Carl has been working at the UK government since 2013. Carl, I'm reminding you of that, on all aspects of offshore wind. And prior to joining DIT, Carl was a Vice President for Vestas Offshore UK and Country Manager for Ariba Wind. So over to you, Carl. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Marianne. You remind me how old I'm getting. But first of all, let me try a little bit of Spanish and get it all completely wrong. Buenos dias, everybody on the line. Thanks very much, Marianne, for the introduction, and you managed nicely to highlight some of the great things that the UK is doing right now. So just perhaps to recap, currently in the UK waters we have 10.5 gigawatts installed of offshore wind. A couple of days ago, we actually hit a record. 44% of all the energy in the UK was produced by wind. That's onshore wind and offshore wind. So the onshore fleet is currently around about 13 gigawatts. And the offshore fleet, as I said, 10.5. But more importantly, for offshore wind, we're currently installing an extra 10 gigawatts currently, big projects building out. And by 2025, that phase of construction will have completed. So the UK will then be sitting at roughly around about 20 gigawatts by 2025. And as Marianne said, the UK government back in October has made a commitment to installing 40 gigawatts of offshore wind. Originally, this was set at 30 gigawatts, but has been increased to 40 gigawatts and includes, of course, 1 gigawatt of floating wind. Now that's an enormous increase. I remember at the time when we were discussing this, it's just another 10 gigawatts. But in the time frame that we're operating, so from 2025, we expect to have 20 gigawatts installed, which means then in the next 5 years, we're looking to install another 20 gigawatts. So the same amount as we already have installed will be installed. And the way the government looks at this is to look at the sort of average annual build out rate. So currently we're building offshore wind today at around about 2 gigawatts per annum. From 2025, we will need to build that at 4 gigawatts per annum, over 4 gigawatts per annum. And as Marianne also said, a couple of weeks ago, the UK announced its 6th carbon budget. I can explain more about carbon budgets if people would like, but basically this is the UK's government's trajectory to reduce carbon reductions. And they announced a 78% reduction by 2035. Now, if you look at the numbers to how to achieve this, electricity is incredibly important. With decarbonisation of the heating network, decarbonisation of the transport network, and it all coincides with automotive getting increasingly electrification. So the need for power is going to increase. Technically, this is an internal bit of work, so please don't take this for absolute truth. But the internal predictions we have done and the calculations we have done have suggested that we would need to add another 27 gigawatts of offshore wind in that 5-year period. So from 2025 to 2030, we need to add 20 gigawatts. Then we need to add another 27 gigawatts. So overall, that's 47 gigawatts by 2035 need to be brought forward in projects. And this is an interesting issue because right now we have about 18 gigawatts of projects sitting in the pipeline that could come forward, going through consenting processes. So you can see, even to reach the 2030 targets, we need to add a little bit more strength to the pipeline of projects coming through the system. And as you saw recently, hopefully in the UK, the Crown Estate had a leasing round where they just over 7 gigawatts of projects were awarded contracts, including ACS Cobra, but also BP and EnBW and RWE building each some enormous 3 gigawatt projects. And I don't want to take too much of Paul O'Brien's thunder away, but Scotland, the leasing round in Scotland is due to come to a conclusion by the end of this year, and that could release another 8 to 9, 10 gigawatts into the market going forward. So the market dynamics, the need for offshore wind is not stopping in the UK. It's very much going from strength to strength. And as I say, the most important statistic I think for us is the 4 gigawatts going up to potentially a 5 gigawatt per annum build out rate. And you've got to also compare this to what's happening not only in Europe but also worldwide. There is a massive increase in deployment of offshore wind in Europe. Some say we'll be at the 9 gigawatts per annum build rate, 5 gigawatts for Europe, 4 gigawatts for the UK per annum. And then, of course, if you take the world, and I don't need to tell you what's happening in America and the Far East, the deployment is really getting underway. So all of this is pointing to the fact that the supply chain needs to step up. We need more turbines, we need more foundations, we need more cables, we need more substations, we need more capability in the installation of offshore wind farms. And this is really where DIT is working very hard with our colleagues in the energy department to make sure that we have enough capacity in the UK to build these wind farms. So as Marianne said, back in October, the Prime Minister announced that he was injecting £160 million into the industrial landscape of the UK. This programme has been a two-step approach. So the first step is to award a port location, a large grant fund. It turned out to be 75 million to build a truly large-scale offshore wind port. So this is a 300-hectare site, 1.3 kilometre quay. It's on the Humber, run by the Able UK group called AMEP. And this is designed to be able to house the big heavy manufacturers, turbine blade manufacturers, tower manufacturers, monopile manufacturers, but at the same time also have the capacity to build out. So it has a large amount of transient storage space that offshore wind developers can use during the build out of their projects. The next stage, of course, then was to look at how can we help to build the industrial landscape, and this is where we're running currently a live scheme where we are funding investors who wish to come to the UK. And now we're halfway through this scheme, and it's not quite the right time to announce who will be coming, but this is big companies, tower manufacturers, foundation manufacturers, and indeed wind turbine companies and cabling companies. And this was a result of the continuation of the offshore wind strategy. So the UK government in 2019, along with the industry, spent 2 years, a very long 2 years, negotiating what the industry could do if it was given the pipeline. So at the time of writing the strategy, the pipeline was 30 gigawatts by 2030, now it's 40. And the industry committed to having 60% lifetime content of the wind farm coming to the supply chain in the UK. It also had commitments on driving further exports and also some very important commitments around equality in the industry. But that on the back of the sector deal, the industry has been brought together by the government to say what is missing in the UK. And the honest answer is everything is missing in the UK. If we are going to a 4 gigawatt per annum build rate, even areas that we have very good capability in, we haven't got enough capability in. And then there are areas that we just don't have capability in currently. So the industry, the development community looked at all the things and had a priority list of the easiest things they thought it was to attract. And about 4 months ago, they issued a notice saying that as developers, they would like to see more tower manufacturers in the UK, more foundation manufacturers in the UK, more cabling manufacturers, and indeed more turbine blade manufacturing in the UK. So this is just the first phase of their ask of the supply chain industry. They then went further and said that they would like to go deeper into the supply chain, so componentry for wind turbines, etc., in the UK, and indeed, of course, then R&D, and very importantly, the floating, because I think floating offshore wind is going to become play a very prominent role going forward in the UK, as you can tell from the capacity that we need by 2035 and onwards, because not forgetting that this is all driven by net zero by 2050. We're going to have to use more and more of our real estate in the UK to have offshore wind, and that is going to mean using floating. And it was very interesting listening to at the beginning to Juan. One of the issues that the UK government is also struggling with is the environmental impact assessment, particularly the dynamic of the accumulative environmental impact assessment. With more and more wind farms, and indeed, as Marianne said, the grid connections, we need greater grid connectivity to put the power where the power is needed. And I think what has really become evident to everyone internally in the government is this is no longer one department driving it. Offshore wind used to be driven by the energy department that needed energy, but this now has to be done in relation with the environmental departments. It has to be done in relation to the military side for security issues with radar, etc. And this is something I think the government is doing a very positive job in making sure all the stakeholders are cited very early of what we are trying to do, so that we can solve all these problems of seabed leases, shipping, oil lines, communication lines, environmental impact assessments, security issues with radar, etc. So in summary, the UK really is steaming ahead with offshore wind. There are lots and lots of opportunities, and as I'm sure Marianne will not forgive me if I don't say, this is what we do at DIT. We're very interested to engage with companies who are looking to set up in the UK to either service the UK from their local market with their UK facility as well, or just set up in the UK. So please do come and talk to us. If you have any questions, I'll be very pleased to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Sorry, I was having problems with my camera again. Yeah, that was really good. A really excellent summary of what's going on. I think you gave an awful lot of information there. And as you say, Carl is ready to contact any of you if you want to get in touch with him, as I am at the Embassy Madrid, and I'll give my contact details at the end. Yeah, as Carl said, I mean, to reach those 4 gigawatts a year, we really need to work hard with companies from Spain and other parts of Europe. And indeed, Carl is already working very closely with several companies in Spain, so I'm sure he'd be very happy to work with several more, and the supply chain especially. So thanks very much for that. Okay, so we're going over to Paul O'Brien from the Deep Wind Cluster. Paul, are you?
Morning, Marianne.
So Paul is a senior development manager for the Deep Wind Offshore cluster in Scotland. He's working in the North Scotland for Highlands and Islands enterprise. He sits on a number of Scottish Government industry bodies, including the Offshore Wind Industry Group, the Marine Energy Group, and more recently the Hydrogen Leadership Group. So he knows a little bit about everything. Paul, please give us an overview of what's happening in Scotland.
Thank you, Marianne. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. I'm the cluster manager for the Deep Wind Offshore Wind Cluster. Carol mentioned the industrial strategy, so I don't really have to cover that in detail, but these are the points where we've set out the sector deal ambitions. The 40 gigawatts is mentioned. There's a massive infrastructure investment attached to it. The clusters came out of this, our cluster, Deep Wind. The full title is the North of Scotland Offshore Wind Cluster. It's a bit of a mouthful, too long, so we've shortened that to say what it does, Deep Wind. So we are looking at offshore wind in deeper waters, and of course that includes floating, and Scotland is one of the world leaders in the development of floating. Our cluster, just a quick plug for the cluster, it is currently the largest offshore wind cluster in Europe, 584 members. It's made up of industry, government and university. We call it a triple helix cluster. And we try to bring all of that. You see the diagram, the red bit in the middle is what we're trying to achieve. where everything comes together to aid the development of the supply chain in offshore wind, floating and fixed. Our strength, one of our key strengths, is the number of developers that we have managed to entice to join the cluster. We have 34 developers in the cluster. That includes every asset owner in the UK, including leases that are not yet begun to be built. So we represent basically the whole of the UK's market. We have international players, of course. We have 4 super majors from the oil and gas industry, one of whom has just changed their name. Total is now Total Energies, and we've updated our slide. So if Total's on, please notice that we're keeping you up to speed. But the sheer scale of our ScotWind round has given us this magnet to attract this number of developers. We have more developers in the cluster than all the other clusters, 7 clusters in the UK, all of the rest of them put together. So we're very proud of the fact that we have got so many of the industry developers in the cluster. I mentioned floating wind. This, I don't expect you to try and read this. It is just to emphasize that our floating offshore wind subgroup, one of our main subgroups within the cluster is so large that we've split it into smaller special interest groups. And this is our largest special interest group with 214 members. It's the largest floating offshore wind cluster that we believe. I think maybe Norway is getting to rival us. And the market has been talked about a number of times. This is where we are in Scotland. You can see that the projects are clustered in 2 areas. In the south of Scotland, it's in the Firth of Forth, and in the north, it's in the Moray Firth. So there's a very sort of concentrated element of offshore wind in Scotland. But we also have projects which are sort of further up the coast or in between these 2 areas, and particularly we are now looking at, which has been mentioned a couple of times, the ScotWind Round 1, the first of our ScotWind rounds, and we are looking to deliver about 10 gigawatts. So the target is to try to get to 10 gigawatts from the 15 sites that are available. You will see that we're actually beginning to move away. As Carol pointed out, we need to move into areas so that we're not getting cumulative effects of offshore wind in any one place. So we're now having to look further north, and we're looking at the northern coast and out on the west coast on the Northern Isles and in Argyll, where W1 is. So we are moving the benefits of offshore wind away from those centres that we've created already, and we're now going to spread the development out more broadly across the whole of Scotland. Floating offshore wind is very important to us. The Hywind project is the largest floating wind project in the world at 30 megawatts. We are under construction at the minute. Cobra, of course, who was also mentioned earlier, are building the Kincardine floating offshore wind farm at the moment, which is around 50 megawatts. And we are now looking at 2 further projects which have just joined the pipeline, and they're fairly newly announced: 100 megawatt Pentland project and the recently announced Salamander project, 200 megawatts. And in fact, today, Simply Blue Energy and Subsea 7 have announced that they've signed a letter of intent with Global Energy Group in one of our ports in Nig, to look at the development of the substructures. And that, of course, is an area we're very interested in. So all of the current pipeline, 10.2 gigawatts, we're going to try and double that with the ScotWind round. So this ScotWind round is very important, not only for Scotland, but for the UK as well, as Carol alluded to earlier. Floating wind in the ScotWind round, we're expecting big things from that. These will be commercial scale projects. The Pentland and Salamander projects and Kincardine and Hywind have been stepping stones to the delivery of commercial scale. and we're now hoping to see something in the region of 2 to 3 gigawatts, possibly more, of floating wind coming out of the ScotWind leasing round. This will be very important for Europe as well, because we're looking to build a supply chain that can help deliver floating wind wherever it's needed at the right price. And that is very important when we look at this emerging technology of floating wind. We have over 25 ports and harbours members. You can see the yellow dots there are geographically spread right across Scotland. So we now have a very good handle on how we could begin developing the infrastructure that will aid us in these new areas of offshore wind, where the infrastructure perhaps does not exist right now, but we can develop it in time prior to the ScotWind leasing round being delivered. It's not the only game in town, as they say, for floating wind. We are looking at an energy transition market with the oil and gas industry. The Oil and Gas Authority, which is the UK regulator, have a net zero basin target by 2035. So basically decarbonising all of the recovery energy used to get oil and gas out of the sea. We're looking at replacing that through electrification. And a lot of the companies are looking at floating wind because of the water depth of where the oil and gas is situated. You see it there with the oil and gas fields and condensate fields in the orange, red and green. And you can see that some of the ScotWind projects will be in fact, some of them are right in the middle of some of these oil and gas fields. So we expect this to be a very significant market because of the impetus of oil and gas. They want to have it delivered by 2035, which means we need to start delivering it now. And floating wind is one of the only technologies that can assist the oil and gas industry to do this. The scale of that market is quite significant. Scotland, because of its long relationship with oil and gas over 50 years, we have about 90% of that energy transition market. So you can see there the concentration, the bigger the yellow dot, the more power is required on those platforms. And the OGA, you can see the forecast there. In 2018, they estimated that offshore power platforms on the oil and gas platforms was 21 terawatt hours, but they are predicting that it will fall to about 12 terawatt hours per year by 2030. So only the projects that have the longevity to invest in floating wind and other decarbonisation technologies will be looking at how to deliver this. Others will be decommissioned in that time, and that's why the fall in the actual values. So this market for floating wind could be very significant to help us deliver the 1 gigawatt target by 2030. And we have a number of projects in the pipeline right now, and we're hoping that they will be announced in the coming months over the summer, and you will get a better handle on the scale of the market for floating wind in Scotland. We would like to see us achieving the 1 gigawatt target for floating wind for the UK in Scotland. But the Celtic Sea area, which is down in the south of England, would also be looking to play in this market because they have deep water, and floating wind is also planned there as well. The other transition market, which has become huge in a very short space of time, is hydrogen. The Scottish Government hydrogen assessment, which was published in December, has a target of 5 gigawatts by 2030. Now, to get that into context, that is the same as Germany's target. So it's absolutely huge. And in the same document, the Scottish Government announced an ambition to achieve 25 gigawatts of hydrogen production by 2045. Scotland has a 5-year head start on the rest of the UK to deliver net zero. Our target is 2045 rather than 2050. And if half of that is green, at the moment we don't know whether blue or green hydrogen, either from fossil fuels or from renewable power, will make up the bulk of this target. But if we say that 50% is required, then we're looking at up to 25 gigawatts of dedicated hydrogen production from wind power to be in place by 2045 to achieve this target. So if you quickly do the numbers, you will see that in Scotland alone, we are looking at a potential market with our ScotWind round, the energy transition, somewhere in the region of just over 40 gigawatts by 2045. So that's a huge target, which equals the UK's own target for 2030 at the minute. But we have only delivered 3.5 gigawatts so far. So it is an enormous opportunity for the supply chain, and we would welcome any interest from companies in Spain, particularly in floating wind. We're very interested in talking to companies about the substructures, the manufacture of the components, and the assembly of the substructures. And we believe that this is an area that Spain is going to have to be very strong in to deliver your own future targets for floating wind because of the water depth in both the Mediterranean and the Atlantic coastlines. So hopefully Spain and Scotland can share a lot of ambition in this space in floating wind, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. I've just included my own contact details along with an eco from Scottish Development's Paris office. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. That was a lot of very interesting information there. So I know some of the companies listening today are particularly interested in the ScotWind leasing round, but now you've mentioned the energy transition market, and especially the sort of the huge target for hydrogen. No doubt you'll get quite a few calls, or at least people getting in touch with you, or happy for them to come through me too. But there are your contact details there, so people can take them down. So thanks a lot for that. Okay, so just to remind everybody that if you want to set up some questions, write up some questions in the chat or in the question space, so we can ask them afterwards. So next, let me introduce you to Ralph Torr from the Offshore Wind Catapult. Ralph is a program manager at the Catapult and responsible for the delivery of large multi-project technology and supply chain development programs, and is also running the Centre of Excellence. So over to you, Ralph. Thanks very much.
Yep. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today. So my name is Ralph Torr. I'm a program manager at an organisation called the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. So just going to spend 10-15 minutes today introducing you briefly to my organisation, the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, but talking more specifically about one of our programmes, the Floating Offshore Wind Centre of Excellence. So the organisation I work for, the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, we're a technology innovation centre. We're one of a number of different catapults established in the UK. We clearly have a focus on offshore renewable energy. There are a range of other catapults that focus in different market sectors, but the reason that these organisations exist is really to try and accelerate and support the development of technologies within the UK in certain market areas. So my organisation, with a focus on offshore wind, wave and tidal energy, the objective of our organisation is to accelerate in the creation and growth of UK companies in the offshore renewable energy sector, obviously by ensuring that UK organisations are really well placed to secure a significant share of UK projects, but also working with other organisations to support UK-based organisations in exporting skills and experience. In terms of what my organisation actually has and what we do, so we've got a unique set of kind of testing facilities. We've got a large base down in the northeast of England, with a range of testing facilities, large blade testing facilities, drivetrain testing facilities, simulated seabed, docks, high voltage laboratories. So there's that very kind of practical testing and validation facilities that we've got. We've also got a range of teams around the UK which work in regional offices and support kind of more regionally focused economic development. And again, some of that's a blend of testing and demonstration facilities. Others is kind of supporting organisation with market intelligence, with kind of innovation, knowledge and understanding, technical experience and kind of market knowledge. So yeah, quite a broad range of services that the organisation is able to provide to both the sector, and also we work very closely with our public sector partners, so UK government, Welsh government, Scottish government, Northern Ireland executive, etc., to help them kind of understand some of the more technical challenges that the industry's faced, and ultimately trying to grow, you know, collaborative relationships between those entities, the private sector, and indeed other parts of the industry as well. So yeah, in terms of the way that we work with different types of the private sector, so at the kind of top of the tree, I guess, is the kind of huge tier one organizations and the turbine OEMs and the project developers. So we work very closely with these organizations. And I guess our role in working with them is to help them work together, potentially to address areas of kind of common challenge. So you'll see in a minute that the Floating Offshore Wind Centre of Excellence, a number of our projects are focusing on kind of common challenges that project developers will face in floating wind. But we also try and act as a bit of a bridge between these very large organisations and much smaller organisations, which may have some very relevant and innovative and useful technology, but can sometimes struggle to really engage effectively with the very large organisations. And a big part of what we do in bridging between those is actually support the development of technology by offering and supporting the opportunity to perhaps test or demonstrate or validate that technology in a controlled environment, or at least a simulated environment, before its first commercial use out on a project site. So again, we kind of sit between these very large organisations and SMEs and kind of more agile innovators down at the bottom, and obviously everything in between there as well, you know, sits in a similar model. We also have a very strong set of relationships with the UK's academic organisations. So we have a number of specific research hubs, which are collaborations between us and a number of specific research institutions in the UK. But we do work more broadly with academia, again, with a view to trying to identify, really kind of promising, developments in the academic world and how they might help support the development of the industry. But I guess also to help make sure that the academic world is working and focusing on the industry's most pressing challenges as well. So again, it's a bit of a kind of two-way relationship between the two. I mentioned very briefly at the beginning, you know, we work across all different sorts of offshore renewable energy, but the vast majority of our work clearly is focused on offshore wind. We kind of group our activities into a number of different areas. So we've got accelerated next generation technology. That's really the work that we do on supporting the development of the new generation of offshore wind turbines. So big program of work coming to conclusion at the moment with GE, that's helped take their Halide X turbine through the process of achieving type certification, etc. So that's a really good example of us working to help kind of bring to market the next generation of offshore renewable energy technologies, from turbines to kind of, you know, component level. We've got energy system integration as well. So, you know, as Paul and others have highlighted, you know, the new offshore wind projects are coming to market, not just with a view of plugging themselves into the grid, but with a much more kind of diverse and complex kind of energy system integration strategy involving hydrogen and other kind of energy vectors as well. So we've got a program of work in that space, floating offshore wind, which is part of the business that I am involved in, and then also smart and sustainable O&M. So a huge part of you know, the UK's current, you know, employment activity, for example, related to offshore wind, is actually owning and operating the facilities once they're in, and there's still huge opportunities to reduce the cost of that, make it safer, make it healthier, and also develop technologies, you know, that can help other markets and future projects, you know, to deliver that work more successfully. And then again, as we move towards net zero, some other kind of dynamics come into play. So reducing the carbon emissions of, you know, the O&M practices themselves, looking at decommissioning of projects, and how we can, take a more kind of circular and sustainable approach to some of the development of that technology and how it's used kind of post-operation as well. So they're the 4 main areas of activity of my organisation. My contact details will be available. I'm going to focus on floating for the rest of my presentation, but if you do want any more information about the organisation more broadly, then do feel free to get in touch and I can connect you with the right people. The programme that I run is called the Floating Offshore Wind Centre of Excellence. This is just one programme Catapult runs. This was established about 2 years ago now with a view to accelerating the commercialisation of floating offshore wind. The UK has a particular interest in this, because we think it's going to play a key role in delivering net zero, but also we think there's a really good opportunity for this to be a kind of key driver of economic growth. So, as I say, the Centre of Excellence, it's a collaboration with currently 13, but soon to be a number more, project developers. We've got a relationship with the Supergen academic programme and a number of other kind of stakeholder partners as well. So a nice kind of rounded, broad consortium who all make a contribution to a kind of a central budget, and then we work with our partners to develop and deliver projects which will support the acceleration of this commercialisation. We do have a strong focus on the UK market. We work across 4 different kind of work streams. We've got technical development, supply chain and operations, development consenting, and a work stream called delivering net zero, which is really about the kind of policy level changes Carl mentioned at the beginning of the session today. Government and other stakeholders are realizing now that the journey to net zero isn't just a technology challenge, that there's a whole range of things that need to slot into place to make that happen, and certainly the Catapult and this program are trying to make sure that the work that we deliver is as useful to those broader organisations and helping that kind of reconfiguration of approach to policy making and the like as well. It's a very flexible model that we have. So whilst we develop and deliver our own projects in isolation, we also work closely with a wide range of other kind of stakeholder organisations as well. So we don't just deliver project work on our own. We can collaborate and co-fund activities where there's kind of mutual benefit. And as we link to the website there as well, where there's a lot more information about our projects and partners and the like. So what I'm going to do now is perhaps just highlight 1 or 2 projects that we've done recently, just to give you an idea of the sort of work we do and I guess the rationale behind our projects. I think there's a good level of consistency in part of what we're trying to do with, for example, what Carl's presented and what Paul's presented. So we are trying to support the development of a supply chain that's able to deliver this huge pipeline of projects. But I guess we have a kind of particular focus on perhaps the more kind of technical part of that challenge. So how do we make sure that the supply chain is developing the right capability and the right capacity in the right places at the right time? But also, working with specific organizations that we think have really, exciting kind of technology that will address quite specific challenges that we've identified with our partners. So the first project I'll just talk through very briefly is one on dynamic cabling systems. There's another project that's the kind of sister project to this, focusing on mooring and anchoring systems. So this is the first phase of a multi-phase project we're doing in dynamic cabling systems. And effectively, the objective of this project was to try and understand the design requirements, the technology for the various types of projects we're likely to see here in the UK. So basically, what is the UK going to need in terms of technology to deliver its own projects? And we're looking across the whole kind of dynamic cabling system, componentry, and then looking, once we'd understood what the design requirements were, looking at the state of the art of technology. So where do we think we've already got technology that can meet those requirements, and where do we think there are gaps? And then we've also done a bit of work looking at the UK supply chain specifically to say, well, where technology exists, where can we source that from the UK supply chain, where can't we? And also where there are technology gaps, who in the UK supply chain might be well placed to develop that capability. And there'll be some work put out into the public domain in the next kind of month or 2, providing some guidance as well, more broadly, about the kind of scale of the opportunity for the supply chain in dynamic cabling systems. And it's trying to take some of these high level projections for the growth of the market and break it down at the kind of component level And a project following on from this, which is just getting going at the moment, is a kind of broader technology development and qualification program that will run for the next couple of years. And it's really about our program trying to support the development of technology to fill any gaps, but also to work very closely with the supply chain. And it should be clear, whilst we've worked closely with the UK supply chain, particularly when it comes to growing, developing new technology and filling gaps in the supply chain, we're looking very broadly there. So any organisations from out with the UK who have an ambition to come to the UK and establish capability in the UK, we'll be very pleased to speak to these organisations and help understand how they might fill some of these technology gaps that we've identified. And then the second project I'll talk about is looking at what we call strategic infrastructure and strategic supply chain capability. So effectively, it's kind of port infrastructure and strategic supply chain capability, which is effectively in floating offshore winds, kind of large scale steel and concrete manufacturing and assembly. So again, what we've done here is look at the development or the deployment scenarios that we've got for floating wind to try and understand what we think the industry is going to need in terms of infrastructure and supply chain capability, what we've got at the moment, and how we might work to fill those gaps. And this project is ongoing at the moment. It should conclude around September this year, but we're looking to make quite specific recommendations about where infrastructure developments might be best located and what sort of capacity and capability we would develop where and when in the UK, and working very closely with organisations like DIT, SDI, the offshore wind clusters, and indeed each of the governments in the UK as well, to make sure that we come to a kind of shared understanding of how to most efficiently and effectively develop this infrastructure, but also make sure that the kind of economic growth associated with offshore wind, is spread quite broadly around the UK as well. So, and that's just another example there of some of the project work that we're doing. So in terms of how we can help your organisation, my contact details will be available. I guess if you're outside of the UK market and you're looking to get involved, my organisation, the Catapult, can provide you with guidance on the sector more broadly. We regularly get involved in consortiums bidding in for research and development funding, consortiums working with commercial partners doing project work. So again, if you're looking for partners, based in the UK, again, we can provide you some guidance there, and also, pointing you in the right direction when it comes to kind of regional development actors. We've heard from a couple today, but on the kind of regional level, there's quite a few different organisations, and we have good relationships with all of those. So again, if there's better guidance required about who you might want to speak to, we can provide that guidance as well. Kind of broader market information and intelligence. It's not really something that we sell as a product at all, but very lot of good information in the organisation about what's going on in the market intelligence. And then finally, if you are a technology developer, you're looking to take your technology through the final stages of commercialisation, on more kind of commercial relationship, or to provide testing demonstration services is something that we can provide as well. And I guess if you're based in the UK and you're looking to export out of the UK with a particular interest in the Spanish market, a similar set of support opportunities from the Catapult, really. So I just kind of suggest you get in touch with myself, and either can help you directly or point you to a relevant colleague. So nothing more from me. So thanks for your time, and I will hand back to Marianne now, I think, if that's okay. So thanks for that.
Yes, thanks very much, Ralph. That's really interesting to hear about the areas where you can actually help organisations from other countries and how you can work together there, as well as the specific areas that you're working with, like next generation technology, energy systems integration, and of course the Centre of Excellence, which gives you sort of opportunities to collaborate with industry and supply chain. So that's great. Thanks very much for that, and I'm sure we'll be in contact with you again about it. Okay, so next is Kirsty Adams from Scottish Power. Kirsty, good morning, Kirsty. Kirsty is a Senior Supply Chain Strategy Manager in Scottish Power. Prior to that, she has worked on both the contracts and product side within Scottish Power for a number of years after completing the Scottish Power graduate programme. So over to you, Kirsty. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Marianne. And hi, everyone. Buenos dias. It's nice to be here. So yeah, as Marianne kind of said, I'm going to just touch on, I guess, the kind of UK supply chain opportunities in the UK, and from a kind of developer perspective from Scottish Power Renewables perspective. So, sorry, moved on too fast there. So yeah, so Scottish Power Renewables, as you probably know, is part of the Iberdrola group, and Iberdrola is kind of present in 9 countries at the moment, and you can see a kind of quick snapshot of our global pipeline here. We have a minimum of 12 gigawatts forecast to be operational by 2030, with a potential of up to 18 gigawatts, including our development activities. So as you can see here, this is where our kind of offshore wind portfolio is at the moment. And today I'm going to be focusing more specifically on the kind of UK projects. I suppose for a bit of background, first of all, and I won't go into too much detail here because Carol and others have touched on the kind of UK offshore wind industry generally, but I suppose it's maybe helpful to give a bit of insight from a developer perspective, and kind of and just how important that, you know, the kind of offshore wind sector deal is to creating kind of offshore wind development in the UK. So the offshore wind sector deal really frames the roadmap to deliver against the kind of targets set by the UK government in the UK, and we've seen that BEIS, the kind of UK Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, is placing even more importance on delivering for UK industry in forms of benefits for supply chain, jobs, kind of R&D skills, ahead of allocation round 4 of the Contracts for Difference mechanism, which is opening up towards the end of this year. We did see that 5.5 gigawatts was awarded in allocation round 3 a couple of years ago, and we're expected to see this increase in line with the government's emphasis on offshore wind and the 10-point plan announcement late last year, which Carol has already kind of spoken about. So I guess just a bit of background into what that kind of means from a developer perspective. With the government's pledge of this 40 gigawatts by 2030, and I won't dwell on that too much, we know that that's, you know, a very ambitious target, and it's great to see that the government has set such a huge target for the UK. That the opportunity therefore is absolutely vast, and with this increase in number of projects coming online in the next 10 years, it will really require a significant growth in the UK supply chain in order to deliver. But in order to deliver these targets, we are also, you know, kind of looking to deliver against our requirements to BEIS and delivering against our commitment to the UK industry in the form of the offshore wind sector deal. So when the kind of allocation round 4 is coming up at the end of this year, which I kind of touched on, we can see that there's a lot of emphasis now placed more on delivering for the UK industry, and there kind of will be a lot more emphasis on, you know, the use of UK companies and looking to really, you know, boost the UK supply chain as much as possible. So the revised supply chain plan guidance really focuses on delivering against these 5 pillars that we've previously seen, which means there's a number of opportunities for kind of you know, companies worldwide and globally to really invest and contribute to this UK offshore wind market. In a highly competitive market, the need to compete in cost is important, and the Offshore Wind Industry Council recently assessed potential opportunities for UK manufacturing industry, and found that there was scope to deliver to grow capacity with manufacture of blades, monopiles, towers, export and array cables. And BEIS has demonstrated the real need for these facilities by launching a manufacturing support scheme early this year, which will provide funding for these major investments into creating these facilities. So it really does demonstrate, you know, the commitment that BEIS has and the kind of UK offshore wind industry really has in delivering this 40 gigawatts by 2030. And just to touch on, I guess, Scotland, which you know, Paul has obviously given a really good, robust kind of explanation of already. But I guess probably from a developer perspective, again, the opportunities kind of upcoming from this is really, really massive. It's the first leasing round we've seen in Scotland in over a decade, and it's delivering up to 10 gigawatts of offshore wind in Scotland, including a number of sites which we've already spoken about to deliver floating offshore wind at a commercial scale for the first time. So this presents an incredible opportunity for Scotland to really become a global player in the offshore wind floating market. Scottish Power and Iberdrola specifically have gained valuable experience to date through delivery of our UK and European projects through the pipeline that I've already shown. So the ScotWind leasing round will really allow developers such as ourselves, along with supply chain, to apply this experience by harnessing up-to-date technology to create a real sustainable supply chain in Scotland, not just for floating wind, but also for the fixed wind that is up for grabs as well. So that was just a really quick whistle-stop tour, a bit of background, because I know that others have really touched on this already. So I'm just going to talk through some of the successes that we've had in the UK from Scottish Power Renewables perspective in delivering against kind of offshore wind sector deal, and how this presents opportunities for the UK industry and for others to get involved and kind of invest. So our East Anglia 1 project, which is currently operational, became operational in summer last year. So that's an installed capacity of 714 megawatts. And it's just off the kind of the southern North Sea, just off the coast of East Anglia there in the southern North Sea. So I guess just to kind of chat through the delivery of our commitments of the supply chain plan. So just for a bit of background, developers must have an approved supply chain plan by Secretary of State in order to enter into the contracts for difference auction, which is the mechanism for kind of financing offshore wind provided by BEIS. So in order to kind of, I guess, give a bit of background about how important this is, I thought I would just touch on a kind of case study of what we done in East Anglia. So through delivering our commitments of the supply chain plan, we established it was key to, 1, create impact, and 2, leave a legacy for the local area. So this strategy ensured that we didn't only achieve the benefits through the construction of the project, but these benefits have been long lasting in the local area. And although our construction finished, last summer, we are still in the area and still making impacts and working with the kind of local companies there. So the project delivered in excess of its 50% UK content target, and this was achieved through a real innovative contracting strategy where subcontracting opportunities were made available to local companies to competitively tender for the works. So you'll see there that, kind of an investment of over 145 million in the East Anglia region alone, not just the UK, was made through the East Anglia 1 project. In addition, Scottish Power Renewables contributed to invest in local facilities such as the Great Yarmouth Port and the creation of a world-class operations and maintenance facility in Port of Lowestoft. And a number of supporting services were also delivered by local companies such as media support, catering, offices, supplies, etc. So these are the types of, kind of examples of what we would write into kind of supply chain plan and what we would be looking to deliver in order to, really create an impact in the local area and make sure that as a developer, as a responsible developer, we're working with the local companies and we're really kind of getting into the area and really making a difference. Types of local companies engaged with in the project ranged from established engineering companies, as I say, to some of the supporting companies and even those transferring into offshore wind from an oil and gas background. So in terms of innovation, East Anglia 1 also surpassed its innovation targets, which we set out in our initial supply chain plan, by really embracing new technologies to deliver the project. So East Anglia 1 was the first to use a 7 megawatt turbine. That probably seems, quite small now that we see the technology that's evolving now, but that was, a really big win back when we first went into construction. and development phase. The first to use a 66 kV inter-array cable and deploy the three-legged jacket foundation, as well as first to use the newly refurbished Bokalef 1 vessel. So innovation in technologies is just kind of one of the ways that a lot of new entrants can really establish themselves in the market, and probably kind of linking in nicely to what Ralph's just presented in terms of working with companies such as the ORE Catapult in order to get up and running into the offshore wind market and really make an impact. So another kind of initiative that we took during East Anglia 1 is that we kind of ran an innovation competition with Innovate UK, and we saw finalist Rovco from Bristol, who specialise in unique artificial intelligence-based technology, as well as Sedeco from Glasgow, who is the creator of an innovative gripper technology. They secured funding from Innovate UK through a competition that Scottish Power Renewables ran, and this really helped with their entry into the offshore wind market and gave them a real platform to enable them to test and get some funding from ourselves, from Innovate UK, and additionally, East Anglia 1 dedicated a kind of dedicated test site project manager to prioritise innovation. And as a result of this, we deployed 8 new technologies within the East Anglia 1 project. And on the kind of third, I guess, kind of strand of the offshore wind sector deal, which focuses on skills. This is one area which East Anglia 1 really prides itself in delivering on its successes. The skills strategy that we have developed within the East Anglia region has really been, vastly recognised, and we've worked with a lot of local companies in order to deliver this. So through our outreach and through our partnerships with various institutions, over 4,200 young people have been engaged with across the region. And I'll just pick out a kind of couple of examples of the kind of successful initiatives that we've implemented. I won't speak through them all, but things such as, a donation of over £76,000 to the Offshore Wind Skills Centre to sponsor 26 individuals looking to pursue a career in offshore wind. The launch of our new Offshore Wind Apprenticeship programme saw the recruitment of 2 local females from the region, and we've actually just launched this year's campaign to recruit a further 2 this year. So that's all about that kind of legacy piece that I've touched on, and we're kind of we're just in the operations and maintenance phase now of our East Anglia 1 project, but we're still in the region, and we're still creating that impact and creating these opportunities. And over 3,200 individuals participated in STEM workshops in order to develop further knowledge about careers in renewable energy. So as you can see, we've invested a great deal in the development of skills, and there's tons of other examples that I could touch on too. But we'll continue to do this through our legacy partnerships within East Anglia, such as being a member of the Skills for Energy group through East of England Energy Group. So that's kind of, I guess, a whistle-stop tour of how we've delivered against our offshore wind sector deal and kind of supply chain plan targets for East Anglia. And we're hoping to really build on that success with our East Anglia Hub project, which is up and coming. So in terms of kind of future opportunities that yourselves can get involved in, or potentially if you're looking to kind of come over to the UK, etc., Scottish Power Renewables is looking to build our kind of East Anglia Hub project, building from our East Anglia 1 wind farm. So the East Anglia Hub will be made up of 3 wind farms. It's a kind of single delivery programme for 3 separate projects: East Anglia 3, East Anglia 1 North, and East Anglia 2. So this whole project will deliver up to 3.1 gigawatts and kind of power about 2.7 million homes. So in terms of timescales at the moment for the hub, we're just currently engaging with our supply chain in order to develop our contracting strategy and our kind of procurement plans. You may have already seen that Siemens Gamesa have been successful as our preferred bidder for the wind turbines, and recently announced just last week Siemens Energy and Acre Solutions preferred bidder for the East Anglia 3 converter station. and construction is expected to commence in around 2022 with an ambitious delivery plan of all 3 projects being fully operational by 2026. So as mentioned before, kind of early supply chain engagement has begun, and we welcome those interested in engaging with us as part of the delivery of this project. And I'll flash up our kind of supply chain contact details at the end of this presentation. Yep, so that's kind of the kind of contact details. As I mentioned earlier, the guidance for allocation round 4 at the end of this year really puts emphasis on delivering projects with the best outcome possible for the UK industry. And as Carol and others have touched on, there's a lot of gigawatts to be delivered in the next kind of 10 years or so. So we'll be looking for, a good support from other kind of areas and regions to kind of get involved in the UK industry and really kind of help us drive towards these targets that we've got. So fantastic opportunity to invest in the UK wind, the UK offshore wind industry. It's a really exciting time across the whole of the UK, as we've seen. So yeah, I'll just leave that there. That's our kind of contact details, and also we've got an offshore wind supply chain database that you can register up on to get further updates on our upcoming projects. So thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Kirsty. That was so for the overview and for the specific information on the East Anglia Hub, which I think is really interesting to hear. Scottish Power's commitment to work with local companies, and also shows how important it is to actually be in the UK to be able to access those projects and contracts. So yeah, especially with the stricter rules now for supply chain that's been applied by the UK government. So thanks very much for that, and we'll go on to our last speaker this morning, Juliet. Good morning, Juliet. Or good afternoon. Or, no, it's still morning.
Still morning.
Still morning. An hour later in Spain, but it's still morning.
Yes.
So Juliet is one of the founding partners and the managing partner of Uric Clark Solicitors. Her expertise is primarily in the areas of employment and business immigration, and she works very closely with DIT, so she's a great asset to us. And she's going to talk to you about all the questions that we've been asked at DIT in Spain about people movement and EU workers post-Brexit. Thanks very much, Juliet. Over to you.
Marianne, thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I am going to talk for 5 minutes. I'm very conscious of time. My main mission is to abolish some of the myths over Brexit. So as Marianne has explained, I'm basically a general counsel. Effectively, companies find opportunities, and as you can see and have heard, there are many opportunities in the UK. You land them, and then typically I help on the delivery of those, so practically getting the people in and sorting out what is needed. In terms of today, I have 3 slides, so a few things I want to speak about. Effectively, the main thing that Brexit did, I didn't vote for it. I am very sorry. We are now trying to remain friends with the entire of Europe, is the movement of people. So it abolished the free movement of people. So effectively what that means is you need to get a visa. So if you win projects here, you need to be able to bring people in. Likely you're going to need a visa. Visas are altered and movement of goods. But today I'm just going to talk on the need for moving people. The laws in relation to employment as well as tax haven't altered, so it's just people. So from the 31st of December 2020, so at Christmas, we abolished free movement of people. You now need a visa. For those that are in the UK who are European nationals, they want to apply under the EU settlement scheme. Effectively, that is going to preserve their status in the UK and effectively enable them to remain. That is an amazing scheme. It's free, you do it online, and it's pretty much instantaneous. So a great thing to do for any staff or people or talent you have here, make sure they sign up. Then if you're looking at opportunities in the UK, you can come in as a business visitor. You can basically go to sites, check out what's going on, but it's very much you are visiting. You cannot stay longer than 6 months. And effectively, if you're wanting to get paid or actually deliver work, you are likely to need a work visa. There is a great frontier worker permit, which allows you to come, remain living in these scenarios in Spain, but to be able to come and deliver on these projects, potentially look at the frontier work permits. Always worth looking at whether you have any staff married to Brits, because they can come in as spousal visas, but more likely, if you're looking at delivering projects, you're going to need work visas, and most likely the most common are the skilled worker visas. The main ones I'm just going to chat through now are, if you're looking at coming and setting up in the UK, you win a project, you need to deliver it, you can send one of your key individuals on what's called a sole representative visa. It's an amazing visa. There are no financial commitments. Effectively, the person can come in and establish operations for you. If you already have an established operation, and or you're looking at wanting to bring in a number of, say, engineers, developers, that type of thing, then you are most likely to need a skilled worker. So that is effectively the UK entity gets a license and then you sponsor people. So it was called a tier 2, but it's now a skilled worker visa. There are minimum thresholds on skill levels and salary, but in this industry, it's generally not an issue. The other is an intercompany transfer, so transferring people from the overseas entity into the UK. But as I say, you need to allow time, so allow at least 3 months to get a license. So effectively, the entity here applies for a license and then sponsors those people into the UK. If you want to try and avoid that, or it's fewer people or very skilled people, then you can get individual visas for some of these individuals. So you will sometimes hear some of these things bandied about. So there is the global talent visa, the startup visa, and an innovator visa. The global talent is very much an individual with specialist skills coming and delivering. The startup is starting a business. The innovator is more if you've established a business. And then you get into investor visas, which are less likely, but more for an individual. There was announcements by our Chancellor this year that they will be bringing in further visas to enable better and easier free movement. But as I say, basically the only thing that has changed is it will be the need for these visas. The tax and the employment still the same. So those are the things that you will want to consider. My contact details are there. I am more than happy to answer any questions, help anybody with anything. We spend the bulk moving the people and also sorting out the corporate structure. The UK does rock. Our pubs are now open and the sun is shining, so we're all super happy. So if we can help at all, we're all happy to.
Okay, thanks very much, Juliet. You made that sound actually quite straightforward. It looks complicated, but you made it sound quite straightforward. But anyway, I'm sure that people listening this morning will want to get in touch with you if you give more specific information on different points you just set out. But of course, here at the embassy, we could also give you some initial information too. So please, get in touch with us directly if you have any queries. And you have Juliet's email there too. So thanks very much for that. Okay, so we're just going to go on now very quickly. We are running a bit short of time, but we're going to just go to a few questions. Lisa, over to you. You've got some questions lined up from the audience.
Yep. Hi, Marianne. Yeah, we've got some questions here. I don't know if the speakers want to come on camera. But right, first one. What are the biggest barriers to a floating offshore wind delivery, and how competitive are these new and kind of different emerging technologies?
That's a very good that's a very wide question you asked, Lisa. And I think the interesting bit from a policy point of view is that the government has said that it wants to bring a gigawatt forward by 2030. So that's coded language from the government to say we will separate it and we're willing to entertain the potential price uplift that offshore floating offshore wind may bring. And I think that's a very important distinction to separate it from the fixed bottom, because it was clear, particularly as you heard nicely from the East Anglia team, project sizes have just become enormous. I mean, project sizes are, you know, 1 gigawatt project is a small project now, and it would be unrealistic to think floating wind from where it is today could get into that scale of things. So I think the interesting thing is that we need to see the technology mature and start driving the cost down, and the only way to do that is actually get on and do it and start building it, very much as Paul says. You know, we're looking for sort of some of the foundation solutions to set up at scale, because the honest answer is no one has got a scaled operation for building these structures yet, and I think that's going to be crucial for bringing the cost down. I don't know if that links into, Paul, your ideas maybe.
Yep, I would say that what we're looking at now, we realise that we have to get the cost of floating wind down. So we're looking at, you know, the biggest item different from fixed and floating is the substructure. And if we can reduce the cost of the substructure, that would be a big step forward. So we're looking at the industrialization of substructures, both in the design and the manufacture, or design for manufacture, so as to actually lower the cost as quickly as possible. But you're right, Carol, the only way to do it is to deliver it. And we need these initial, what we're calling stepping stone projects, like Salamander I mentioned earlier, and the Pentland project. We need these projects to show how we can get the cost reduced. And every time we do a project, the cost does come down. So we learn by doing.
And I think that's a very interesting point as well, because to date, the floating offshore wind farms have used the sort of 100 megawatt demonstration round type route for getting seabed leases, and as Paul says, there are now projects that are increasing in size, because certainly with the government's 1 gigawatt target, I don't think it would help the industry if 10 100 megawatt wind farms got built. We need, as Paul has outlined, you know, the big projects. Salamander is sort of, you know, the 200 megawatts that then become 400 megawatts, and then suddenly they're in the gigawatt league again and challenging the fixed bottom sizes. So I think that's something also that we're very conscious to make sure that the rules, regulations, the seabed leases change to allow big projects to rapidly go up that deployment capacity curve, as it were.
Okay, that's great. Right, we've got another couple of questions about local content. So obviously the UK is aiming to increase local content, and some of our listeners want to know if there's still opportunities for Spanish supply chain companies.
I suppose the first thing to say is that we're not mandating a local content in the UK. It might seem like that, and the results might be pointing in that direction. But you know, sort of again, this is all stems from the sector deal, where the industry has committed itself. So this is the industry in agreement with the government that local content is important. So I think it's important to sort of highlight that drive is not a sort of a Brazilian type approach where 75 local content, that's it. But at the same time, we're also incredibly realistic in there are some things that the UK will never be competitive at doing. And, you know, likewise, I think there are probably some things in Spain that the Spanish industry is just not competitive, because whether it's sourcing the input materials like rare earth magnets or something like that. So there are areas that the UK is not particularly has not got particular strength. So there will always be opportunity, and you know, sort of we very much want to still keep that dual drive. We still want to see offshore wind reduce. We're not talking about making everything in the UK at any price by any means. So there are still opportunities to supply into the UK market. However, the sort of, you've got to keep in mind that the overall ambition of the industry is to get to that 60%.
The only thing that I would add to that, the 60% target includes the operation and maintenance. It's all about lifetime costs. So the operation and maintenance is roughly about 40–45% of that 60. So when you look at the actual CapEx, capital expenditure side of it, the missing 40% is actually a huge part of building the wind farm. So the supply chain opportunity in that 40% is all in the capital expenditure side of it, i.e. building the wind farm. So there's still a huge opportunity for companies outside the UK to play in this market.
That's great. Any other comments from anyone?
Yeah, I think probably just to echo what Paul and Carol have said, and also, you know, I think particularly if you're looking to work in the UK, you know, partnerships is a great way to come, and it's a great kind of strategy as well. So even, you know, in terms of if you're looking to, you know, subcontract out to some UK companies as well, that's also an option. UK content is not, you know, the only thing that we're striving for in the offshore wind industry. There's other areas such as, you know, skills, innovation. You know, I think the Spanish companies could come over and really deliver, you know, in terms of R&D, in terms of innovation, in terms of all this other stuff that you know we're delivering on. It's not just UK content in the supply chain. We've got lots of targets that we want to meet, and I certainly think that there's plenty of opportunity for Spanish companies to come and contribute to that.
That's great. Thanks, Kirsty. Okay, and now on looking to the future, bit of a kind of guessing game here, but how quickly do you guys think that floating offshore wind can reach parity with fixed offshore wind?
From a government perspective, the sooner the better. I think there's always a danger of parity, because, you know, sort of we're seeing some differentials now in fixed bottom. We have fixed bottom HVDC wind farms versus AC wind farms, closer to shore, less cables, different cost structures. So I see floating is in that scale, and as Paul says, some industrialization of the structures is going to lead very quickly. So, you know, I do hope within the 2030s we're going to see sort of comparative cost models that sort of kind of work within the tolerance of projects. You know, sort of some projects are cheaper than other projects, as it is today. So yeah, I think hopefully, if I had a crystal ball, I would say in the 2030s we should, when we see large scale industrialization and happening. And I think just one last thing to add on that is that from where we're sitting right now, and I'm sure Paul can add to this, is we see a vast variety of different proposed floating solutions, and I think what is needed is very similar to what happened in sort of the fixed bottom with monopiles really coming of age, is to get a design that can be highly industrialized and can be effectively engineered to be the most competitive. And right now, you know, is this concrete? Is this steel? Is this floating? Or is it tension legged, etc., etc.? So there are all these questions. I think that hopefully the 1 gigawatt that the UK is looking to install will help flush out the technologies that are most promising.
Right. Okay, and then I think we'll end with this one, a bit more political, but someone asks that the current Scottish administration is keen on holding another referendum. Is this kind of putting any pressure or any delays on the development of offshore wind in Scotland?
I shall leave Paul to answer that question.
I was going to say surely it's Kirsty. Okay, I'll have a go. Yes, highly topical. It's a difficult one to answer because the regulation on the electricity market side of it is still a UK one. Even if Scotland were to leave the UK, we would still have a grid that connects to the rest of the UK, you know, and we would still trade electricity with our partners. Currently, we export to England, Ireland, and we're just building connections to Norway at the minute. We are a big exporter of energy. That's not going to change no matter what happens. And in the future, we will sell energy across the borders. that will just continue. We've got some of the best wind resource in the world, so it just makes sense to utilise our wind resource to help decarbonise the rest of the UK. And in the future, our ambition is to actually expand much further and start to help decarbonise Europe. And hydrogen may, it's very difficult to tell right now, but it could become our biggest export of the future, just given the amount of interest in the idea of exporting wind energy as hydrogen right now. So I don't think we're afraid of what happens if we do go independent. The energy market will still remain. So I think not a lot will change, but time will tell.
Thanks for that, Paul. Right, I think that's all the questions, Marianne.
Is that all the questions? Okay. All right. So that's it. We'll finish here. I think there's been an awful lot of information this morning on the UK market and our ambitious projects. And I think it's pretty clear that we need international partners to take them forward. So I hope that's the message you all got. Thanks very much to everybody, to the audience, to the speakers, to the Asociación Eólica. And I think before we had a slide with mine and Lisa's details, which has gone down now, but hopefully you got our emails. So very happy to hear from you in the coming days, weeks, whatever, to hear more about the UK market, and very happy to answer questions, as are the speakers. So thanks all very much again, and see you soon, or speak soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Adios.